Welcome. My name is John Eckhardt. I'm a professor at the Wisconsin School of Business at the University of Wisconsin in Madison. I'm also a co-founder of Generator, a seed investment fund and business accelerator, and I'm an editor at the Entrepreneur and Innovation Exchange. Today we are very fortunate to have with us Matt Younkle. Matt is a career entrepreneur and a founder, currently a CEO of a company called Murphy.com that is headquartered here in Madison, Wisconsin. Matt has agreed to come in and share with us some insights about his career as an entrepreneur. Matt, welcome to the EIX Exchange video.
Thanks, glad to be here.
I'd like to start at the very beginning. Were there any telltale signs early on in your life that demonstrated to you that maybe you might become an entrepreneur?
I'm starting with the lemonade stand. I mean, I joke that my first exit was when I was 14 years old. I successfully sold my paper route that I had to my brother. So I've had one sort of business or another ever since I was old enough by the laws of the state of Wisconsin to have one, starting with the paper route. And that moved from paper route into a piano studio. I was pretty good at playing piano. My teacher had a backlog, and so she said, "Hey, I can teach you how to teach." So I had all these students. I was making $30 an hour when I was 16 years old, which was great on my own time. So that part of the entrepreneurship kind of life was great. But when I moved into when I got to college, there were a couple of classes I was taking that had issues with books and lab notebooks and all that other kind of thing. So I approached the professors and said, "Hey, do you mind if I bundle all this stuff and sell it at the beginning of each semester?" So for a couple of years while I was a student, I would make about $10,000 the first couple of weeks of every semester bundling all that stuff up. Not scalable, right? But still, it would pay rent and pay tuition. And then, while I was involved with, while I was at school as an engineer, I got involved with some of the competitions, which kind of really solidified, I think, my desire to be, I guess, a career entrepreneur, if you want to call it that.
And was there a particular moment when you said to yourself, or you started to realize or made the decision that you wanted to become an entrepreneur?
One of the things that happened was one of the competitions on campus, the Schuss Prize for Creativity. It's now known as Innovation Days. But having been through that process and actually having to get up and create something and pitch it to judges, to other engineers, to business folks, that was just really invigorating, just to kind of get that idea out there to the rest of the world and present it and get the reaction. And so that I really enjoyed that and enjoyed the process of bringing something to life.
So it sounds like part of your entrepreneurial journey were some of these opportunities that were available to you as a student at the University of Wisconsin in Madison.
Oh, most definitely, yeah.
Can you share with us sort of a timeline or a history of how this evolved to where you started earlier? You talked about selling piano lessons to now the company that you're running today.
I guess early on you're just sort of opportunistic. You sort of I was a kid in Green Bay. When you're 16 in Green Bay, you don't have a ton of career opportunities, right? You could be working at McDonald's. You might have a paper route. Piano lessons were kind of interesting and new, and that was kind of fun. And then getting to University of Wisconsin, kind of that opened up. You started to see sort of more of the world. It's more of a melting pot of folks from around. So the opportunities start to open up, and really I've always had a lot of ideas. And I was, and having the competitions on campus sort of was the additional nudge that was needed to really sort of say, okay, I can actually work on this stuff. There's a deadline. There's some structure around that. There's a reward at the end. We could win $10,000 in the Schuss Prize for Creativity. So that really got me thinking more about kind of making a really diligent effort as opposed to just being kind of opportunistic around kind of what was happening for me. And then today, I mean, it's interesting to see because now on campus there are just so many opportunities and contests, and you can get involved any number of ways. Back when I was doing it, the Schuss Prize was the thing, and I was involved in the Schuss Prize the first, second, and third year that it was available. And there was a business plan competition that got started on campus that I never participated in because it didn't start until the year after I graduated, but it would have been great to have that sort of outlet as well. The most influential thing next to meeting my wife at UW was the Schuss Prize for Creativity for me. It wasn't any one of my classes. It was that extracurricular.
So along your timeline, there was this company called TurboTap, which fit somewhere into your college experience and took you out of it. Can you tell us more about TurboTap?
Sure, that was, so the second year I got involved. So the first year I kind of had this, I thought I had a great product and I didn't win the Shoes Prize. Second year I had lots of ideas, and the one that kind of bubbled to the top was this idea for pouring draft beer faster. We called it TurboTap. I entered that product or project with a couple of friends of mine, and we took first place. So we won $10,000. Got a little bit of early publicity, so it was kind of cool, and made some attempts while we were still students to commercialize it, which culminated in kind of this big flop of a demo at Anheuser-Busch. So it was kind of disappointing, and that kind of shelved the project for a little bit. But in the meantime, so that project got shelved. I worked on another startup. My background is computer science and electrical engineering, so this was sort of now at the rise of a lot of the .com stuff, and I got hooked up with a company that was one of the first to stream video and audio over the web, called Mosaic. So Video Mosaic. The Mosaic browser came out of the University of Illinois. The Video Mosaic technology came out of there as well. So I was part of the team that was helping commercialize that technology and kind of get it out there. And so, so I was involved with that for a couple of years. That company got bought. The .com bubble burst. The consulting stuff I was doing kind of dried up, and there was TurboTap there. And I was a better, more capable entrepreneur at that point, and kind of looked at it and said, look, I think there's still something there, but it'll kill me if I don't find out for sure. So good, bad, or otherwise, I'm going to rekindle this project. So I got that started in 2002 and ran that until 2007. And that went from sort of just ideas on paper to patents to prototypes to production, and now it's in use. It's been used to pour hundreds of millions of beers all over the world.
So you said, when you returned to TurboTap, because of your earlier experiences, you were a more capable entrepreneur.
Yeah, more dangerous maybe.
More dangerous maybe. Can you describe to us what insights you had, or what transformation occurred, or that lead you to say, at that moment I had changed, I knew more?
Well, I mean, certainly just on the business side, I had more confidence in terms of raising capital and business development and how to just work the phones and work the room and all that kind of thing. I was an engineer, right? So engineers, the joke, how do you tell the difference between an introverted engineer and an extroverted engineer? The extroverted engineer looks at your shoes when he talks, right? So there's all these kind of stereotypes around it. And I wasn't a business guy; I was an engineer. So the Mosaic, the kind of the journey through Mosaic was kind of getting me to move from being an engineer, and I was kind of in the middle, because I was working with really geeky engineers at Mosaic. These were the PhDs that had run the patents and everything else, and I was the guy that had to translate everything from kind of the super geeky stuff to the business stuff, and I was a person in the middle because I could understand. I was like the one guy on the team that could understand both camps, so I got really good at that. The other thing I got better at was just the concept of what is a product. The first product, the early college version of TurboTap was messy. It was designed to pour pitchers. It poured pitchers really fast. Cups were, so it had a very, very narrow use case, but as a college student it seemed like the greatest thing ever, because of course you're pouring pitchers if you're a college student, right? Who cares about cups? And who cares about how easy it is to clean and all these other things? And so in kind of going through and figuring out what went wrong the first time around, kind of just having a better sense of what makes a product and something that you can commercialize was really helpful for me.
So you're doing something different now with Murphy.com. Mm-hmm. Yep. Whatever happened to TurboTap?
So I ended up selling most of my stake in TurboTap. The company is still out there producing units, selling units. I sold most of my stake in the company in 2007, did a little bit of consulting back, took a little bit of time off, and then was looking for sort of another project to get involved with. I love TurboTap. I like drinking beer. I like pouring beer. But the beer industry was as a computer science guy, wasn't sort of like my career. So it was a fun place to be for a few years, but that's the kind of business. It's kind of definitely an old boys kind of thing where you're kind of out drinking, slapping backs with other guys, and that's okay. I had a lot of folks on my team that loved doing that. I was not one of the guys that kind of relished that. I did it and it worked out, but I'm happy to be back in the sort of the computer science, IT kind of world again with what I'm doing.
In between the two companies, between Murphy and TurboTap, you were doing something. What were you doing with that time?
In between Murphy and TurboTap, I took a sabbatical. I did some consulting back to TurboTap. I did consulting on some other projects that were sort of in the draft beer equipment space. But I took a good 12, 18 months where I wasn't doing anything except doing some sailing and teaching myself how to catch big fish in saltwater. So it was good.
I know a lot of entrepreneurs who've been fortunate enough earlier on to have a success, that they have these breaks that really helps them come up with the next thing. They kind of are able to put together what went well, what didn't go well from their last venture, and then helps them understand what their next move should be.
Yeah, it gives you some perspective on kind of the world. It lets you. I have my idea list gets bigger every day, so it's 10 pages and growing. So I'm always adding to stuff. But when I get involved with these projects, whether it's TurboTap or Murphy, I mean, it's very, very intense for, it's a marathon. Like, it's a very intense marathon. Like, everyone thinks startups, they're sprints, but they're really marathons. I mean, it's 2 or 3 or 5 years. In the case of TurboTap, it was 02 to 07. In the case of Murphy, we're basically starting our 5th year. It seems like, 5 to 6 years for me is kind of where, is where I can add the most value kind of in the companies. And so, so Murphy is still very exciting, but we're starting to see now kind of how all the various pieces are going to fit together ultimately for that company. So, yeah, it's nice to take that, no matter when you are, no matter what career you take or sort of what path you go, you have very few times where you're sort of in these transition periods, and I think you got to, relish those, because it doesn't happen very often. So if you can take a year, great. If you can take 2, great. If you can take 6 weeks, and hike around or whatever, but I think you got to do it. I see a lot of people that just sort of roll from one thing to the next, and it's like take those little breaks.
So Murphy.com is the company that you launched after your break in your consulting space and after TurboTap. Mm-hmm. Can you tell us about this company, like where this came from as an idea and what it is today? Sure.
Well, I mean, a lot of the origins from the technology go back to when I cut my teeth on digital media and streaming with Mosaic. But the kind of the origins of what Murphy is or how it got started was a result of having moved back from the Caribbean to Madison. I was unboxing all my stuff. I had all these boxes of music, boxes of CDs, and I didn't own a CD player. I no longer had a CD player, so it was sort of like it was kind of this kind of moment where I was sort of questioning, like, well, what's the meaning of all of this? What's the meaning of all this plastic and all of this music that I had acquired? And if this is me, I'm just one person. How many of these CDs were produced? 15 billion in the U.S. alone. It was a lot of plastic. And I'm looking at, well, if I just recycled all that plastic, it would be worth $1 billion. But better yet, maybe there's a way that we can preserve all the music that's on it for folks and use the CDs as a launching pad to some future of music ownership. And so that's what we're doing with Murphy, is we're trying to create a future for music ownership, for media ownership. It's not just music, but also movies, other forms of flat media.
So let's talk about defining moments. You said earlier there was this pitch to Anheuser-Busch with TurboTap that didn't go so well, and obviously you still remember that.
Oh, yeah, clearly, yeah.
Are there other like defining moments for you, like make or break it moments along your path that you'd like to share with us?
Certainly participating and winning the Schuff's Prize for Creativity. I think that was a big moment because, I had always placed, but winning that competition, you get a little bit of notoriety in the press, which is sometimes enough to kind of the spark that can kind of keep you going. You also get some just really great feedback from the judges, and just knowing that they sort of bought into your idea, I think, gives you a lot of confidence in terms of wanting to take the next step with your product. And then the money you win, so $10,000 in the case of TurboTap, that was enough to get a patent filed for us. So I think looking at TurboTap, getting our initial trial with Wrigley Field was a big moment for us, because we had done a lot with the product. We had been showing it off to lots of places, and then finally, when Wrigley came calling, we were ready. We didn't bomb the demo like we did with Anheuser-Busch the first time around. We were ready for the Wrigley demo. We kind of learned our lesson, and that ended up with a trial. We had basically a 2-month trial that we turned into a case study for Wrigley, and once that was done, it was started to become easier to make the sales into some other stadiums. And then that break led to another break, because once you're in Wrigley Field and US Cellular Field or White Sox Stadium and a few others, now all of a sudden there's a little bit of buzz that gets generated. Wall Street Journal runs a cover story about TurboTap, and then you're off to the races. So, but again, ready to catch that lightning in a bottle. I think with PR is one of those things that every company wants. Like anytime if if I do a guest lecture to a class, I say, who wants to have your company on the cover of the Wall Street Journal? And everyone raises their hand. Of course you do. But the question is when in the life cycle. And a lot of companies want that kind of publicity really early on. It's like, wow, well, it'll just, that'll be the big break. But you have to be ready for it. So we got a lot of publicity early on with TurboTap when we were college students, but we didn't have a product. So we couldn't take, it was great, it was fun, we were in the media, but it had very little impact on the business because we didn't have anything we could sell. Round 2, TurboTap, again, you learn those lessons, and you kind of want to wait as long as possible to get that kind of publicity so that, so you're ready for it, take advantage of it. So yeah, so those are some of the big breaks kind of along the way. Murphy, we're still, we haven't caught the huge break. We had an interesting customer call yesterday. One might be in the works. I'm feeling pretty good about this year for Murphy.
So do you have a mentor?
I've had many mentors over the years. My longest standing mentor is Joe Boucher, who's an attorney of all things at Anheuser-Busch. But he's an attorney with a really good business sense because he's run businesses. He's got an accounting degree and everything else. And I got hooked up with him when I was a student at UW. He was a guest lecturer at the business school, and when the TurboTap stuff was starting to kind of catch fire, I didn't really know what to do, and I was asking around, and everyone said, well, you should go talk to Joe, he'll be able to help you out. So so that goes back 20 years almost now since I've known him, and we've stayed in touch, and he was the attorney for TurboTap, and he came and visited for a bunch of time when we were in the Caribbean and got to know his family. I've seen his kids grow up, and he's just terrific guys. He's one of the, in terms of the Madison entrepreneurial scene, he was involved with startup companies before it was kind of the cool hot thing to do. He's been doing it forever, and a lot of a lot of the structure that's here in Madison, you can sort of trace back to what he and his firm have been doing for a lot of years. So I'm really fortunate to have him.
A lot of communities have one or two, or if they're fortunate, people like Joe that are basically involved everywhere. They almost seem like they have limitless energy. That's the way I would describe Joe. But have the experience to help people along their way. The first lunch I had with any business person in Madison when I first moved here was with Joe.
Interesting. Yeah, there are other connectors in town. So you have guys like Alan Dines, like you, like Dick Leeser, who's now sort of retired but got the Wisconsin Investment Partners off the ground and just made a ton of connections. So every community has some, but it's this is like a decades-long process to kind of evolve Madison from kind of a government university town into this have this entrepreneurial culture. And we've got a lot of energy happening, but it's still need another who knows what the next 10 or 20 years are gonna bring here.
And so, what do you think is the most valuable lesson you've learned so far as an entrepreneur?
I think from a mental standpoint, sort of the mindset of grounded optimism, I think is kind of the lesson that I've learned. Because you look at, I've met a lot of other entrepreneurs, a lot of folks that are successful over the years, and everybody has their own style, their own, sometimes the most successful person in the room is the quietest person in the room. Sometimes it's the loudest. You never know. Everybody has their own style. But with entrepreneurship, you always are going to have ups and downs. You always have to have this hope for this better, brighter future, but you can't let that hope sort of cloud your better business judgment. So I've kind of termed it grounded optimism, I guess, and it's kind of this balancing act, and I'm always working on balancing that because my tendency as an engineer is to analyze and to pick apart, and I tend to not, just my tendency is to not act as quickly as an engineer because I want more data. But if you're analyzing and always looking for sort of the downside, you're very grounded, but you're not looking at, all right, what's the upside here? So I always want to have other folks kind of around me that can always be pointing out these various upsides and get, and get energized about it. So that grounded optimism, I think, that balance of optimism and sort of, introspection or sort of analysis, I think is the lesson. I haven't exactly figured it out what the exact ideal balance is, but the fact that there is a balance is the big lesson I've learned.
Yeah. And so this balanced optimism, it's about yourself, right? Guiding your own compass.
Yeah, grounded optimism. So balancing the two. So yeah, it's about having the right mindset and making sure that on your team you have the right mindset, because you can be the person that is always just very, very analytical. And if you recognize that, you can surround yourself with other people that are more the blue sky thinkers that can make sure that the company, or vice versa. You can be the guy that's always the optimistic guy. But if you just surround yourself with other folks that always are wearing rose-colored glasses, you might get lucky and everything goes great. But you might need that help, that guidance, sort of say, all right, well, let's really think through, what this product needs to look like and what the financials need to look like and everything else.
And how much of this bounded optimism do you share with your team? Is it all of it, or is it more strategic about how you're motivating the people around you to pursue the vision?
I think when I look at team, because again, everybody has their own personality. So when I'm talking to my entire team, I share data, but I'm also sharing. I mean, we set goals. I share the data. I tend to let folks know, look, I'm a pretty even-keeled guy, so I'm not going to be the kind of guy that's going to maybe jumping up and down and high-fiving y'all and everything else. That's just kind of that's me, and that's the kind of the culture that we have. But when I meet with folks individually, I try to figure out sort of where are they on the introverted extroverted spectrum, kind of the personality stuff. Again, to make sure that they kind of are aware of how their personality sort of meshes with with their coworkers, and B, so that they have an understanding of so we can move them into the right roles, roles that they tend to want to that they get drawn into, as opposed to roles that they sort of are doing out of duty. That's ideally what you want to be doing. You want to be doing something. Your passion is something that pulls you, that you always want to be doing. If you're not doing it, sort of it's always drawing you there. Whereas your duty, you kind of have to, you're kind of getting pushed that way. And it's always better in a startup to have folks that are kind of more passion oriented than duty oriented.
So what advice do you have for aspiring entrepreneurs, those who are just starting out?
No one will have more passion for your own idea than you. So I think I get pitched by other folks with ideas and everything else, and oftentimes it's, hey, I've got this great idea, can you run with it, right? You know how to turn stuff into businesses, can you run with it? And we'll split it 50-50. Oh, what a deal for me that would be, right? 50-50. But ideas are the easy part, right? So if you've got great ideas, you also have to have the passion to see them through. And no one piece is rocket science. It's just about taking action and adapting and everything else. So you have to have enough passion to see your idea through.
Do you have a favorite quote or motto?
I say it a lot, but it's 100 times more easy to critique than it is to create. So go create stuff.
So Matt Younkle, thank you very much for sharing your insights with us today about entrepreneurship. And if you're interested in learning more about Matt and his company and about the future of music, go to www.murfie.com. And we hope you enjoyed this video on the Entrepreneur and Innovation Exchange.